Cool. So today is really about mastering chaos, and it's probably that time of year where things do feel very chaotic for a lot of people just getting back into work and also just getting back into the swing of things. But I wanted to share today a little story about what happened to me 1 January a few years ago, and the couple of years of chaos that I went through with my practice and the lessons I've learned through that time. So before we start, I'll just get Rose to share today's worksheet in the chat there, as well as the link to my Profits course for anyone who's interested in the course. We've got our next cohort going live in about 3 weeks' time, Feb 17. So keep an eye out for that in there as well. So first things first, like frustrations associated with chaos and chaotic times, it tends to be not just the unexpectedness of these events, because classically they come out of the blue, but almost always they happen at varying times as well. It's very rare that chaos happens when we A, expect it, or B, have time for it. So it's usually a double-edged or a double whammy. And if we have no way to resolve it, or a lot of people think in terms of systems, and chaos is quite a unique system in how we go about resolving it. And it's something we all kind of need to get very good at as business owners, because this is probably one of the fundamentals of our role. So we would all love to have smooth waters, just to be able to come to work and everything kind of goes to plan. And if we do have challenges, they're small challenges that fit within our comfort zone, or within a level where we can deal with them with relatively easy resolutions, or ideally just linear type problems that we can solve. We find this even with our caseloads. It's nice to be challenged, but not so much that it causes too much stress for us. But the mistakes I see with a lot of practice owners, one of the big ones is just not planning for chaos. And I think this happens classically because we just fill our time, we fill our books with as many patients as we can see, we fill our time with all the other little jobs and things that we have to do. And it often doesn't leave us with a lot of capacity to change or to adapt our schedules. And when chaotic things happen, then we have to completely clear the slate and find a way to respond. And even that time of having to reschedule things and whatnot slows us down. It makes it difficult for us to react quickly in an environment where we need to. Now, the other side of this is something we'll talk about a little bit later with stagnation. And this is also the flip end of what I reckon I've seen a lot of in the last probably 18 months on the back end of COVID and through a lot of burnout and whatnot amongst practice owners as well, which many people have experienced. But the big idea today is really about welcoming chaos. It's a bit paradoxical, but understanding that it's going to happen. It happens to everybody, and we have to be the people who deal with it or look to resolve it. So the framework for today we're going to go through is called the growth rings, and this was from a man named Bill Ekstrom and Sarah Worth in a book called The Coaching Effect. So I remember going through this in about 2021, which was probably the most quintessentially chaotic year of my life, where we were obviously running a business through COVID. This was year 2 of COVID, and I had we had our first child in January of 2021 as well. So our personal life was all over the shop. We're adapting around that whilst trying to run a business and stay afloat and respond to everything that was happening in that environment with lockdowns and yada, yada, yada. So there's 4 growth rings: chaos, complexity, order, and stagnation. And I'll talk you through this in conjunction with the story of what happened in January of 2022. So if you saw the landing page, you might have seen this little thing. What I'm going to do is just quickly jump over into YouTube over here and just play. So that's my clinic there, Life Ready Physio and Pilates. This is literally at the front of our practice. I don't know if the sound...
Point Cook shopping centre buckled under the weight of the water.
A shopping centre shower comes a deluge. Shoppers scream as the ceiling at Sanctuary Lakes gives way to the storm above. A wave of debris crashing to the floor.
The heavens opened, it was throwing it down with rain.
So that was how I started a year which I call 2022, and this was a pretty hectic year for me at the best of times, and it ended up being the year that I actually sold my business, but not because of this flood. But yeah, it was a turbulent start, to say the least. I'll just get that screen share back up. Sweet. So basically, the background to this was we'd been through 2 years of COVID already. By the end of November, the year prior, we'd finally come out of lockdown. So there were no restrictions from December. So we're dealing with rat tests and a huge population of people suddenly getting COVID and trying to figure out how we can manage all this within our clinic. And whilst all of this is happening, and that was my main focus that week, I decided to, I was away with my family. My 2IC, who was very much in charge from about September of the year before, I told him just to have a good break over summer. It had been a stressful time, and I didn't really want to bother him too much in this period. So I just said to the admin, you guys can call me anytime if anything happens. And so I was on the phone to my admin staff member, her name's Sheridan, and we were chatting because the roof had been leaking and there was some minor leaks in the clinic and stuff, but the internet had gone out that afternoon. So I was just kind of talking her through options and just saying, look, if you can remote Wi-Fi access or whatever, we'll be able to get things going. And then she kind of started to sound very anxious, and then she was very panicked about something. She said, I need to get off the phone really quick. And she hung up, went outside, and then 5 minutes later, she called me back, and she was just she was talking a mile a minute and just going, oh my God, the roof has just collapsed. And I was like, what, in our shop? And she's like, no, outside the shop. And basically telling me how she stormed out of the building. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy serious. It wasn't until I saw the footage that night that I was like, oh my God, this is a real serious flooding event that's happened at our shopping center. And so the thing was, even at that time, I think because I was quite far removed from it, I was like, okay, first priority is just deal with Sheridan, make sure she's okay, just ensure she can go home. None of our phones and stuff are going to be working, so there's pretty much nothing we can do about this. And thankfully, none of our therapists were working that afternoon, so they'd just finished at 12:30, and this happened about 1 o'clock. And so we didn't have any patients to deal with that day. We knew we were pretty much just going to be cancelling everyone's appointments the next day, so we could do that easily. But it was dealing with the chaos. So the clinic's going to be flooded. No one was allowed into the shopping centre or anything at that time. And thankfully for me, so this is one of the advantages I had as being part of a group practice, is you've got more than just yourself to call upon. So I tried to get in touch with my business partner. He was away. I ended up speaking to, I think we had texts because that was the best we could do. But I ended up speaking to a colleague of mine, Jared, who runs a business in WA, because they'd been through a similar event. So they'd gone through a flood about 6 months prior, not to this sort of extent, but they had water damage in their clinic. So he kind of talked me through a couple of the steps we needed to do, but it was very much just get on the phone and just take action straight away. Call your business partner, call Jared, call flood emergency services. The one thing I did in that little bit of chaos was I was thinking about, all right, what's the next challenge after this? If the clinic's ruled out, where are we going to work from? And thankfully I had the phone number for the doctor whose clinic was across the road from us. So I think we'd done an in-service for them 6 months before. So I just connected with him, and I knew that they were actually fairly quiet, and obviously being January as well. So I just told him, look, this is what's happened. We don't know when we're going to be able to use our clinic again. Are we able to sublease rooms from you? So that evening itself, within a few hours, I've got the flood emergency services organised, and I've got us somewhere to practice from, which was the main two things which we need to solve. How do we fix this problem, and where are we all going to be next? So that was kind of almost like the chaos aspect of that resolved. And then getting into the complexity part of it was really just the cleanup the next day and turning up and knowing that I didn't really want to draw down on all the social capital I'd gained from most of my team from the hard work they'd been doing for 2 years and force them to have to deal with this situation. So I sort of thought I'll just go in there myself and I'll deal with that. And it's also honestly a little bit easier when you're the one person in there, because then I could just take photos of things and just, you know, knowing that this is going to be an insurance claim and whatnot, and just get through that. And have my team then deal with the more orderly stuff from about Sunday afternoon, which is just getting clinicians to know, all right, this is when our patients are going to be seen, and this is when we're going to move some appointments around and whatnot. And basically, by the time the team turned up on Monday morning, there's order again. It's not the same clinic, but it's organised, and they know, right, I'm treating between these hours and these hours. Admin are going to support me with that. If anyone comes to the clinic, they're going to be redirected over here. We've got these rooms sorted. And so that was like probably the best 48 hours of my business ownership in terms of managing chaos and getting through an event like this. And it did help very much that I think that I'd been through 2 years of just chaotic environments and got used to just like reassessing and changing plans and whatnot. But also just this model, like understanding, okay, this is a chaos event. You just have to act really, really quickly and get everything back into some sort of even keel, and then move through complexity and try and get things organized for everybody else. So coming to the growth rings framework, which is really the crux of what today is about, it's not hard to identify chaos. Chaos is when there is uncertainty, disruption, unpredictability. Like it's literally like the storm, quote unquote, but it can sometimes actually be a storm, which wipes out your whole building and nothing feels under control. The equivalent is, you drive your car off the road. You've really just got to try and get it to somewhere stable or back on the road as soon as possible, where problems are arising faster than solutions. The example I give, it's chaos when you're on the phone to somebody and you hang up the call and you've got 3 missed calls in that time. That's when you know you're in chaos, pretty much. Like events are unfolding faster than you can deal with them. Decisions have to be made with very limited information. So like I've literally not been to the clinic. I think I'd seen one video that Sheridan had shared with me, which was the one that ended up on the news later. And was like, right, what is most likely to have happened here? And let's be quick and decisive and just get something happening. And I think this is where the entrepreneurial type people really shine, because it's in chaos where you really make your money, so to speak, or I definitely earned my crust over that 48, 72 hour period, whilst everyone else got to sit at home and not have to worry about a thing. In complexity, and complexity is the space I prefer to live. I really like complexity where you've got systems and interdependencies, and there's a level of challenge, but there's a manageability around it. So often in complexity, we've got multiple moving parts, and what this might look like is multiple different staff or team members and whatnot interacting. There's experimentation, there's strategy, there's potential to try and scale things as well. Like a good example of complexity is like if you were to take a room in a satellite clinic or something like that and just figuring through, it's not chaos, there's something happening there, but it's still very much emerging. Is this going to become something we can build up to 2 days a week? Or, who are going to be the therapists that go in there? How are we going to manage the rosters to get so-and-so here and then back to the clinic in time to see their private patients? And growth in this space happens when leaders focus on the high level problems, which might be, getting a tenancy elsewhere, or trying to ensure everyone is quite happy and understands their role in the process and the communication that goes with that. Order is, for lack of a better expression, I honestly think order is where most employees thrive, because that's the place where tasks are generally repetitive, they're efficient, people know what they're coming into when they come to work. Order is turning up to work, you've got your list of patients and you go, okay, I'm just going to go through and see each patient. Or for our admin teams, it's going, right, we've got everything organized, here's where you are billing your appointments from, there's a couple of missed calls or whatnot that you need to to call back this morning, but otherwise everything's pretty cool. Ironically, admin is probably the more chaotic end of the business than the actual physiotherapy side, and I think this is so often underappreciated with what our admin do for us every single day. But generally speaking, your business thrives when you can maintain order for the majority of the time. However, there is one caveat, because this is kind of a funnel, which is that if you stay completely in order, you actually end up in a place called stagnation. Because if people find they're not being challenged enough, they start to disengage. And that's a balancing act. That's a balancing act that's very prevalent amongst physiotherapists, because they're high-achieving people that want to be challenged, but not so much that it creates a circus around them. And if we don't challenge, especially our best performing therapists, we get this sort of inertia and growth tends to halt, and the business can decline. The classic decline that happens in most service-based businesses is you might lose your best team members just because they're not being challenged enough. And I think that's one of the big distinctions is you get, I always talk about rock stars and superstars, where your rock stars are just people who are just super loyal and they love working for you, and they just will always be there, and you can pretty much set your watch around their habits and whatnot. And then you have the superstar practitioners, who I feel are the ones who might come in and just give you 2 or 3 good years, and you've just got to get the most out of them. But you as a leader just need to keep challenging them, because if you can continue to challenge them, they will stay. But the moment they don't feel challenged, they go, okay, it's time for me to go and do my PhD, or it's time for me to go and specialize in shoulders, and I'm going to go work at this clinic. Or something like that. So that's the balance of order and stagnation, which I think probably just doesn't get talked about enough, is how we navigate these circumstances. So that's the growth rings model. I really like it. I think it simplifies and it gets us contextualizing problems with phases of business or phases of problems that we've got between chaos, complexity, order, and stagnation. Now, I thought we'd just do a quick 2-minute task. You might be able to do this, Amanda, if you've got one hand free. Everyone has a problem. We all have multiple problems. Pick the biggest problem you've got, because we can chat through it on today's call even. And we're going to firstly just identify the problem, and then come back and just simply figure out which growth ring does this problem fit into. Is this a chaos problem? Is it a complexity problem? Is it an order problem, or is it a stagnation problem? And I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back together to talk about it. Cool. Have you got that worksheet, Amanda? I don't know if that came through. Yeah. Awesome. That's pretty much our 2 minutes there. I reckon we'll come back together. And how did you go, Amanda?
So do you want me to run through what our problem
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Just let me know if Jackie's too noisy in the background.
No worries.
So one of our biggest sort of issues at the moment probably is a team member who's a little bit disgruntled in terms of what her expectations or what her thoughts were around PD. So we're paying for her to go to a course at the end of the month down in Brisbane, and she was just upset that was we pay for the course but we don't have PD leave, so she had to take annual leave for that, and that there was hours of pre-course learning that needed to be done, which we said she could do in work time if she had work time free, but that, you know, we didn't want her blocking out time to do that. And so there's just a bit of a, I guess, a miscommunication there in terms of what she expected or thought versus what our thoughts were. And she was a bit disgruntled with that.
Yeah. So what ring do you reckon that fits into?
Potentially either the complexity or order, like order in terms of everything else is working fine, and it's just a miscommunication potentially, or difference in expectations.
Yeah. I think I would say it's probably a complexity issue. I think a lot of things end up in, like, anything that involves HR or contracts or money often just ends up in complexity. And I think the reason being is for most staff, they just don't have any concept of what your side of things looks like and how difficult it is to make things easy for them. And most of the time they're coming at it from the bottom end, which is, okay, well, I'm going on a PD, I should be paid for the PD, and all the time I'm out of the clinic and everything associated with that. And it's kind of like, even in the public system, that's not how it works. Like, there just has to be some levels of give and take to make these things possible. And that's why it tends to sit in complexity, because there's no, like, the perfect system from an employee's perspective would pretty much bankrupt your business. Because they'd just be taking PD every weekend and just going on trips. And that's where it's at. So we'll talk through a little bit of perhaps the strategy for dealing with that as well. Now, before I dive into that, I just wanted to talk through quickly the Profits program, which I've got launching on Feb 17th. So this is the 4th cohort. Profits is, got it up here, the course for businesses generally under $1 million. The 3 frameworks are around attracting engaged patients, paying fair wages, dealing with, you know, the complexity of wages, entitlements, and all of those things, and then figuring out ways to confidently raise prices through enhancing client experience. So that is course number 1, which I think Rose has already shared the PDF for that. And then I've also got my people course or community rather, launching in March, which is a hybrid program structured around one-to-one coaching and monthly learning sessions for about 90 minutes to 2 hours. We'll all come together for that time online, and we form a beautiful community of people supporting each other, dealing with the ongoing challenges of running a physiotherapy business, and learning a bit about business and a bit about life and a bit about each other along the way. So that's something I'm really excited to bring to the table for 2025. Now, coming back to growth rings. So like I was talking through in the story, so in chaos, it's very much about stabilize, making fast decisions and just going bump, bump, bump. For complexity, that's where we've got strategy and systems and little bits of innovation that can creep into it. And then in order, we're talking delegation, trainings, and whatnot. And for stagnation, like this is where I piss everyone off, is whenever I feel like people are too organized or things are too easy, you just disrupt. Or challenge people. And for clinicians, that might be like your example. Sometimes we have to send our clinicians off to professional development days or disrupt their way of thinking just to create a little bit more, not necessarily chaos in their life, but just to take them out of their comfort zone that little bit to progress forward. I think in your example, Amanda, like the complexity of, I think, managing professional development and PD leave often comes back to us just trying to be as open as possible about what it actually looks like from the business end. And usually our clinicians will empathize with those challenges when we say to them, look, realistically, these are all the costs attributed to being able to send you off for a professional development, but this is also how much money the business loses by you not being here for that time, or from, you know, paying for this or from managing these things. And I think if we're able to open up that dialogue with them, so it's really not a me versus you. It's more the business finances are here, and this is the ideal for you, and we just need to somehow find a way to meet in the middle. I think that generally works okay. Like it's unfortunate that, especially over the last few years, it seemed like because it really wasn't that long ago where getting paid to go, like getting a course paid for you was an incredible entitlement. People would leave jobs because employers were paying for them to do courses, when, you know, most people like myself paid for all of our own professional development our whole career pretty much, and now we pay for other people's as well. And so I think we've kind of gone so far to one side, and it's just trying to bring it back to the other end, where it's like, look, we can afford to pay for your professional development. We're happy for you to have that time off or whatnot, or out of the clinic, and let's just find a solution that works for the two of us. In a larger business, so if you've got 10 staff, you really need a system that's very, very clear. In a smaller business, honestly, I kind of think we just have to adapt. This is where, like, we have room for innovation, because it's too much of a risk in a small business when you've got 3 or 4 practitioners that if someone gets upset about something, they're going to leave. That risk is outweighed by the reality of trying to create equity and fairness for everybody. So, and this is where my advice tends to differ from a lot of coaches, because I've probably worked a lot more with startup clinics where, or smaller businesses, where it's like, look, you can't just say to someone, this is a system and this is how we follow it religiously, when you've only got a small team. And the key is to just make sure that that staff member, one, understands that you're not against them, you're actually in their court, you're trying to help them get away, and this is as good an offer as you can do, and it's not coming from nothing. Like, there's sacrifices that have to be made on both ends. And I think if we can find a middle ground where they can firstly just see your perspective as well, but feel heard for the challenges that they're putting up to the table. I think most people in health are not as concerned about the dollar figure as they are about feeling heard for, this is difficult for me because I've got to put up my own finance as well, whatnot. And often if we deal with this stuff through that lens of kind of, here's my perspective, I understand your perspective, let me listen to everything that's challenging for you, and then let's work together on what's an optimal solution and what can I do for you to help make this as smooth as possible. And I think that's the best we can do, because the alternative is really just pandering to everybody's requests, and nobody wins in that scenario. Like, those people just tend to just walk over the business owner, and eventually they leave the practice anyway. And then you've paid for people to do heaps of professional development, and it goes to reward someone else. How does that sound for you, Amanda?
Yeah, and that's I think sort of the plan that we've got. I've actually got a meeting with her, or like a catch up with her next week, to sort of go through some of that, and to I've scheduled it with our sort of monthly or quarterly progress review, so a chance to sort of sit down and schedule time for her to talk to, as opposed to the other conversation we had was sort of just a 2-minute or 5-minute chat in between, you know, after lunch sort of thing. So
yeah.
And so, you know, reactions are a little bit quicker there, or whatever. So yeah, we'll have a chance to sort of sit down and see what her thoughts are, and explain sort of our side of it too.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lesson we've learned was, she's a newer employee, and so, you know, just potentially just bringing that to the attention of other staff members when they start, that like, this is our PD policy.
Yeah, exactly.
It was obviously, she had different expectations, and people read the contracts allegedly, but they don't necessarily, you know, realize what that might mean put into place. So that was another good sort of takeaway point for us in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's nice in theory, the whole like have a policy for everything, but in reality, like even if you do, people don't read it.
Yeah.
And so you just end up in the same position. And this is one of the things that was challenging for us at Life Ready, was like, we'd had a lot of policies and things, but most of the owners were like, I'm not going to go through, this is going to be like an 8-hour conversation if we go through every single bit and piece here. How do you take leave and whatnot? Like, we just deal with these things as they arrive, and we just generally hope that we've laid down enough trust and goodwill with people that we can just get through these situations easily. I think that's the more pressing end of it. We can resolve anything with our own people if we've got trust and goodwill. And if we don't, no amount of processes or whatnot will help those situations. They're still good to have because they help to build trust with us. But yeah, trying to meet everyone halfway is probably the best solution. So thanks for watching my video on mastering chaos. Now, before you go, simple action from here. This will move your business enormously by making the smallest change, which is joining my Circle community, because inside this community, you get access to expert insights from myself. You get coaching as well if you've got any questions or whatnot. It's a behind the scenes platform, which you can ask me anything you want, really. And you're part of a community of like-minded business owners who are all making the right moves towards building their business. Now, what you get, honestly, you get access to talks I gave at the APA Focus24 conference. You get access to all of my webinars. This includes how to raise your price in 2025 and some of the great stuff I've done preceding this, and all of the future stuff for just a one-time fee. I think it's a no-brainer. I think you should get on board this. But if you want to wait, it's perfectly fine. It's just that the price is obviously going to keep going up as more and more people join, because I want to keep this a nice, tight-knit, exclusive community. So the sooner, the better. But at some stage, we're all going to meet in there. So why not let that be today? Hope to see you on Circle very soon. Cheers.